about Swiss cheese holes.
Okay, so welcome to class 92 of Faith and Calm. And tonight's title is You Are Holier Than You Thought. And I'm going to start it out. I saw a cute little video. I can't resist it, it was a 1-minute video from Rabbi YY. And he said, it doesn't have anything to do with the topic either. he said that there was a famous rabbi, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, who asked the question, what is it with Jews and coffee? A lot of people, they have to have their coffee in the morning. Why is this become the Jewish morning drink? That's not me, by the way. I don't drink coffee in the morning, but it is a common thing. And Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, he lived in the 1700s. So he said that the reason is because it's interesting. Coffee is made out of hot water, but then you put in cold milk. And it's also made out of bitter beans. Then you put in something very sweet, sugar. So it's a study of contrast, There's the hot and the cold. There's the bitter and the sweet. And that's life. That's what we make a blessing on it. We say, Sha'akol niyeh b'dvaro. We thank God for everything, thanking God for it all. And coffee itself, the word in Hebrew is cafe, which is actually the same letters as to have hope, tikva, to have trust and faith in Hashem. So it's a very Jewish drink, I guess, coffee. So what does that have to do with tonight? Nothing. But it was cute. What can you learn from a cup of coffee?
Drinking hot water. I'm so cold.
I'm just on soup day and night because I'm down in the basement. Because they don't let anybody into the office, so I have to work from home, which is okay. I'm not upset about it. Anyway, there's an interesting. This will probably be a short class, but there was an interesting thing that happened in last week's parsha, which was that the Jews got the 10 Commandments, a big event. But for some reason, God said, before that happens, there's some very important thing that has to happen. There's this guy named Yisro. In English, they call him Jethro. And Jethro is the father-in-law of Moses. And he has to come, visit Moshe and give him some advice. Actually, the rabbis have an interesting thing about his history, that he says that when he finally comes and he hears the story of the Jewish people leaving Egypt and the plagues and everything else, he says, now God is greater than all other gods. And the rabbis say, why is that important? Why do we have to know that? And why is it coming from his mouth? And they say, well, because he was a great philosopher, thinker, and scientist. He studied everything. He was looking. He was a searcher. He looked in every kind of knowledge in the world. And he tried it all out. He tried every religion there was under the sun. And he was a restless mind and was a non-Jew. And he was a Midianite or an Egyptian, I guess, that he was the father-in-law of Moses. And when he finally came and he found out about Judaism, he said, now I know. This is what I've been looking for. And he was the first convert. So partly his story is the story of a Jew, that, to become a Jew, you have to first, at least from his perspective, you have to explore everything, but then you'll find out that Judaism is it. Now we already know. Judaism admits it. Now he says an interesting thing. Moses comes down from the mountain for the second time. He came down the first time on Shavuos, but he came down the second time on Yom Kippur. And there he is sitting, and he is judging the Jews. Every Jew is coming. Everyone who wants to learn, everyone is in a class, he's sitting there, and they're all coming to him. And Yisro says to him, you're going to wear yourself out. 3 million people. It's hard enough to be in charge of just one congregation of 10 Jews, but 3 million Jews coming with all their problems. This is not going to work very well for you. Says, I'm going to give you some advice. You have to establish a hierarchy. You got to have leaders of 10s, you got leaders of 50s, leaders of 100s, leaders of thousands. And then finally, if it doesn't, they can't answer it, then it comes to you. But if you don't do it that way, it's just you're going to wear yourself out. You're going to wear out all the Jewish people. And go ask God if that's a good solution. And Moses went to God. God said yes, and that's this way it was set up. So the rabbi says the question, Moses couldn't figure this out. Moses was a smart guy. It's sort of obvious solution. You know, you need a hierarchy. You have to set up a system for how this works, because one person can't possibly handle that many requests a day. So the answer is very basic and very fundamental, and an important idea in Judaism. Moses understood this. He understood that was certainly what needed to happen eventually. He didn't want that to be the start, because ideally and in truth, every Jew should know that they are the holiest person in the world, and their questions and their problems can be brought directly to God, and they don't have to go through any hierarchy. They don't have to go. There's no room for elitism, and there's no room for aristocrats and special people in Judaism. You are face to face with God. You are face to face with Moses. You are face to face with directly to God, and that is the way that it is actually supposed to be. And you have to know that is how your importance in the world. And that's and Moses, that's how I want the Jews to understand their role and their position is, there's nobody better or better than you. That's more important, at least in God's eyes. The big and the little, the small and the important, the knowledgeable and not. When it comes to godliness itself, you are really holy. And there's nobody holier than you and nobody more important than you. In God's eyes, at least, he sees everybody as equally important. There's a story with a Ger Rebbe, the Imre Bina. I think he lived, many, many, many years ago. That was one of the second Ger Rebbe. So it must have been about 200 years ago. Anyway, once he was confronted by a Jew, and the Jew said, "I need to speak to you because my daughter is very sick." And then Rabina said, I have several tens of thousands of Hasidim, and I'm just too busy right now to deal with another issue. And the guy says back to him, he says, for 20 years, my life has been dealing with my daughter's health problems. He says, you can deal with it for 2 minutes. And the Rabina said, that man, he really got me. I couldn't answer him. He won the argument. He really won that argument. So I said, let's sit down and we'll talk, and so forth. So this is the idea that every Jew is extremely close to God. And I'm going to give it that. I'm going to try and bring that home by just a couple stories that sort of explain that idea a little bit better. So this is a personal story I heard from Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson. He said that when he was growing up as a kid, he knew another boy, and this boy, unfortunately, became mentally unstable and would go around in the streets talking to himself and screaming at people. And they didn't have a lot of psychological training, and less in those days anyway. So he was known as a very sad character in the streets. And one time,
So sad.
Rabbi YY was walking in the streets, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe was walking by, and this guy comes and runs up to the Rebbe with a letter to hand to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. There happened to be one of the secretaries of the Rebbe standing nearby, and he knew who this person was. And he moved to intercept the letter because he thought, probably quite reasonably, that there are things written in there that are probably, quite painful and difficult to read. They're, slanders against this person or that, and yelling, whatever. If that's what he's doing, saying, he's probably writing the same sort of stuff, and it's not really for the Rebbe to have to do. So he tried to intercept the letter. And Rabbi YY said, I watched and I saw the Rebbe shoot a glare at the secretary. And he said he was like, I was hurt, watching that. That look was so ferocious. It was like, what are you doing mixing into my business? It's not your business to get in between me and and another Jew. And the Rebbe went and he took the letter because he's the Rebbe of everyone. And therefore, the leader of Moshe, in Judaism at least, he doesn't feel like he needs intermediaries in between him and the other people. So it's he has a right. He's a human being, and he needs also to have that kind of connection and relationship. And that's one of the big lessons in this Torah. In the Torah is, it's not only, this Torah is not meant only for those people who are wise and knowledgeable. It has a lesson, if it's brought out right, for everyone in every single situation, no matter how talented or knowledgeable they are. There was and it goes the other direction too. When leaders get very isolated and just deal with their elite circles and their high, people, and they got this little clutch and they can't relate to everyday people and so forth. They get very detached also from the roots, and they live in these little isolated, elite circles, and it's a very dangerous thing. It's a very dangerous thing for us, and it's very dangerous for them, because they've got all these yes men all around you telling you, you are the leader of the free world, whatever, and so it can be very dangerous. So there's a story that goes along with this. It was a chassid of the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe. His name was Manya Manasov. So this would be in the late 1800s. And he was a diamond merchant. And one time he came, if I told you this, I don't think I've told the story. One time he came to Lubavitch to have a private audience with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was at that time the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab. And he was standing in line, and a guy went in before him, and that guy was just a very simple person, and he spent there a long, long time talking to the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe. Afterwards, he went in, this Manya Manasov, and he was a very wise person. He was a very Torah knowledge person. He was a big scholar. He was also a very good businessman, and he did very well in the diamond business, and so well respected. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe saw him for like a minute or a minute and a half, and then told him, it's over. Your audience is over. And he felt very bad. He said, "Why am I?" He didn't say anything. He just felt in his heart that somehow, I don't understand why the Rebbe spent so much time with that previous guy. So the Shabbos went by, and afterwards, when he was leaving, he came in to see the Rebbe Rashab, and his custom was to give a donation every year, and his donation was usually a diamond. So he gave the Rebbe Rashab a diamond, a real beauty, and he said, "You can probably live off of this for a whole year." And the Rebbe Rashab takes it and looks at the diamond and says, "I don't see anything special about it." I don't know. And he says, "Rebbe, well, let me explain to you. I'm a diamond merchant. You look for color, you look for clarity, you look for, size, and the Rebbe Rashab is saying, "I don't see anything special. I don't see anything special." So he tried a couple times, and finally says, "Rebbe, in order to appreciate this diamond, you have to be a maven." So the Rebbe Rashab smiles, and he says, and to appreciate a neshama, a soul, you have to also be a maven, no? And Monasov got the message. He says, we don't know. We don't know who are the precious diamonds in this world. We don't necessarily see, we think we're not doing that. I'm nothing special. I don't really do it. I'm not the big person. But the Rebbe sees that the specialness of each and every one, each and every Jew, and he sees their diamonds, and they can maybe need polishing, but they're very, very special. So two final stories, I think, also really hammer this idea home. Let's see which one I want to do first. I'll do this one first. So the story goes as follows. This happened a number of years ago. There was an older man and his son. They lived on a little farm in a little village in Europe, and they were very poor. And it was very cold one day, and they only had between them one coat. So they got into an argument, the father and the son, who should wear the coat. The father said, "I'm old, I'm elderly, I need the coat, I can easily get cold." And the son says, "Yes, but I have to go outside into the farm, into the cold, and work. And so I need it. I need it because it's cold out there." And they got into an argument, and this one said it's for me, and this one says it's for me. Finally, so they decided to go to the rabbi, to get the decision. So each one came in, said it's for me. This one said it's for me. And the Rav thought about it for a while and then said, unfortunately, I mean, I have to give it to the son because the truth is he's the one that goes outside and you can stay inside and you have ways of keeping warm inside. So they start walking home. The son is wearing the coat and the son is looking at the father and the father doesn't have the coat. And he feels very bad and he says, I want you to have the coat, father. The father says, I don't, I don't want. And they get into an argument and they get home and there the father is now in the house and the son has to go outside and he's got the coat. And the son comes back in and says, I can't do this. My father's freezing. And they get into an argument again. And now it's the other way around. The son is arguing that the father has to have the coat and I'm giving it to you, even though I should have it. And the father is saying, I can't let my son go outside in the cold without a coat. So they run back to the rabbi and they give back the same arguments. I said, he should have the coat and he should have the coat. The rabbi says, wait a second, let me think about this for a second. And then he goes off, the rabbi leaves and he comes back. And he comes back with a very nice coat with a fur collar and everything else. He says, listen, it's been sitting in my closet for a long time. I really don't need it. I have a second coat. Let me give you guys the coat and you'll have two coats and then you'll be able to take care of yourself. So now the father says, Rabbi, I have a question. If that was the case the first time we came, how come you didn't think of this? So the rabbi says, well, I think I know why. Because this is the story. That when we don't realize the energy that we give off. When you first came here, everybody was thinking it's my coat or it's my coat. So they're thinking about themselves. So I didn't think about it because there was some part of my soul that was thinking, yeah, I have a coat and it belongs to me. And now you created the opposite energy in the room. And you said, it's to be for somebody else. And this is for somebody else. So now it comes into my head that, you know what, maybe I have something and I should give to somebody else. And this is really what Moses was saying to his father-in-law. I understand we need to have a hierarchy. I understand that we need to have that. But when people go beyond themselves and they all try and give for the other, for someone else, it creates an energy around there. And most of these arguments and most of these difficulties disappear because when you're in the presence of somebody holy, in your presence of holiness, and you're in the presence of giving, then all of a sudden you don't get into arguments anymore. So he didn't have problems with 3 million people because they weren't all coming with arguments anymore because they didn't feel that this is for me and this is for me. Because you stand in front of Moses and all of a sudden that energy sort of dissipates. And that's what Moses was really saying was, if you realize how holy you are, the closeness you are to Hashem, a lot of the problems all of a sudden start to fall away. They start to disappear, and you start to get to somewhere a truer place. And you know what? It is possible to be able to do far more than what you thought, far much more than you thought. So I'll finish with one story. I really like this one. I haven't told this one before, I'm sure. There was a mayor of New York. You may have heard of him, Fiorello LaGuardia. Might have been to his airport. He was the mayor of New York from the 1930s through the 40s. He passed away in 1947. So we've heard about this guy. I bet you don't know, but he was Jewish. You ever hear this? He was Jewish. He had an Italian Catholic father, but his mother was also from Italy, and his mother came from an Orthodox family. And he didn't advertise his Jewishness. He portrayed himself as an Italian, but the fact was he was Jewish. And he was a very interesting guy, very much the man of the people, used to hang around in the fire departments, the police offices, and the stores and stuff like that. He was, and by the way, he was a very big defender of the Jews. This was in the time of the 40s, and nobody had a bigger enemy than of Hitler than him. He was very outspoken against about what was going on. Anyway, that was Fiorello LaGuardia. So the story goes, one night, it was a December in New York City, very cold night, 1935. And he went to one of the courthouses in a very poor area of the city. and told the judge, I'm going to give you the night off and I'll be the judge for the night. So the judge was happy to go home, and then Fiorello LaGuardia was the judge that night. The first case came in, and it was a grandmotherly like person, a lady who was caught shoplifting, stealing a loaf of bread. So he asked her what the story is, and she says, he says, I did steal this loaf of bread. But it's because, my daughter is sick. Her husband ran away, and she has 2 little kids. They're starving. And so I went to the store and I stole a loaf of bread because the grandkids need to eat. So LaGuardia turns to the shopkeeper and says, you're pressing charges against this lady? He says, I feel really sad about it, but I'm in a very poor community and people are stealing all the time. And if she gets off, it will set a very bad precedent and other people will come and steal more and so forth, and it will decay the moral fabric of the community. So there has to be justice. Justice has to happen in this situation. I'm sorry, but she stole, she has to fine. So LaGuardia asked, what is the punishment here? So that in those days, in 1935, the punishment was $10. $10, or if you can't pay the $10, 10 days in prison, $1 a day, which was a lot of money in that for people in 1935 in New York City. So LaGuardia thinks about the situation, and he passes judgment, and he says, the law is the law. $10. You have to pay, or if not, you have to stay $10, 10 days in jail. And then does something else. Takes out his wallet, he pulls out a $10 bill, and he gives it to the lady. And then he says, and one more thing, he says, and by the way, I'm going to fine everybody in this courtroom. There were a lot of people there that night. I'm fining everybody 50 cents. Why is he fining everybody 50 cents? Because you live in a city where, where you allow such things to happen, that a grandmother has to go and steal for her grandchildren in order to survive so that they don't fine. And everybody paid the fine of 50 cents, including the shopkeeper. He was glad to pay. If you're going to paid also. And they came up with $47.50, which he gave to that lady. And basically what he was saying was, in order for there to be justice and morality, there's 2 parts to it. There's tzedek and there's mishpat. There's justice, and then there's judgment about it. And there's the strict law of judgment, but there's also, a leader understands that, that everybody is connected. And everybody has to relate to a shop. And therefore, we can't have a justice system that is just pure harshness and strict letter of the law. You have to also realize that, there has to be morality. And the morality is, that she should not have to go and steal in order to be able to support for her grandchildren. So therefore, they were all happy, and they all agreed, and they all applauded, and they were very happy. They agreed that they should each pay 50 cents. So they all gave her the 50 cents. So that was the $47.50. So that was Fiorello LaGuardia's story. So I thought that was a cute story. And my wife just ran away because now it's time for her to speak.
She was looking for her 50 cents. She probably was looking for her 50 cents.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
Great story. Thank you.
Thank you.
What was he raised at all Jewish?
I don't
Question.
know. I don't know. I have to go Wikipedia and find out if he, but he knew he was Jewish. I mean, he just didn't advertise it. That was very common in those days, especially in New York. There's a lot of, for the Jew in 1930s, it was not easy to stand out as a Jew. So, but I think he clearly knew he was Jewish. So,
Well, and he clearly had the values too.
yeah, he had the values.
We
Okay.
love
Do you know
the
what?
stories.
Do you know what? Sorry.
Yeah. What? No.
Do you know why? Do you know why they named the whole airport after him? That's why there's like a lot of mayors.
Oh, he was famous. They really loved him. They loved him in New York. That he was just like a breath of fresh air because he was just so much, what he was. He realized that a leader who's detached and who's an ivory tower and just hangs around with his, Secret Service and so forth all day is not a leader. He was really, he related, he connected with the average person.
Mhm.
And that's very grounding. And that's also very much what a leader needs to be. He has to be, the big and the small, the little and the big. We learned that from Moses. There was nobody who was more important or more part of an inner clique. He really connected to everybody. So this is part of what the lesson was here today. Thank you.
That's so interesting. Both famous New York airports are after mayors. Oh, no, one of them's after a president. Kennedy's after, for the people that live in Massachusetts don't know, but two major airports in New York are Kennedy and LaGuardia, and one is after President Kennedy. And now I know that LaGuardia was a mayor who was Jewish, who didn't advertise it. Anyway, great stories.
Okay,
I finally get a chance to make a comment because I'm not at work.
Baruch Hashem. Okay,
Yeah.
so nice to see all of you. And
Hello. Hi.
welcome to what this reminds me of? Did anybody, I'm way too old. I'm the only one who's going to know this.
What?
It's a funny flashback. There's I won't say it. I'll tell you later.
I like your glasses.
You're going to say romper room,
yeah, exactly.
right? How did I
Oh,
know?
I know Romper Room. Of course I know it.
Oh, and hello too.
How did I know?
Funny flashback.
I don't know why, but whenever I speak on Zoom, I do this. I feel I have to go through a wall to get to people.
Interesting.
I'm
How
always
did
doing
I
this.
know it reminded you of romper room?
No, because I was about to say hello, Amy. Hello, Beth. Hello, sorry. Hello, Mom.
Oh, I was thinking of a
You
different
remember how they
reason.
used to do that? And she held some kind of I don't remember
Was this
what.
the
Right,
same one
that's what I
with
thought it was
Shari and Lamb
because-
Chop? Was that the same show?
No, that's different. I
A
remember
A different
too.
show.
She
What
was
was that one?
Jewish. She was Jewish. She even wrote a book of 1 minute tales of
That's so weird that I knew
Yeah.
that.
We all know.
I was thinking for a different reason it reminded you of romper room.
no.
Because as soon as people go on Zoom, they're like busy checking themselves. And for some reason, it reminded me of the way she looks in the mirror. I don't know. That's weird. Okay. Anyway,
Does anybody
That
want to say
too.
anything first before I
It's
begin?
nice to be here.
Thank you so much. Nice to see you again.
I wanted to say the same. I think I missed a few. And I was also really happy to be back. And I was so happy to see Beth. It's been a long
Me
time since I've
too.
seen Beth.
Thank
Yeah.
you. You guys are so
Me too,
nice.
yeah.
Oh, thank you so
Yeah,
much. I
nice to
miss when
see
we
you.
would be together in person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to do it. Well, it's getting less and less.
It is this week. It's starting to go down.
Yeah.
so that means I'm not going to be part of the class.
I don't talk about that topic, so I won't go do it now, but I do believe it's getting less scary. So anyway,
We
God
have to
bless.
have Story with us.
It should be-
We
We
may have
used to
stay
do it on
for a
Zoom.
while because we have to have Story with us. So
We
you
have to
I
have-
know.
Exactly.
Story.
Yeah.
Unless you do it live and then you just have the computer running in the background. People do that.
They do. Yeah.
Okay, anyway, I don't want to
So
keep you.
this is Faith and Calm number 92. And tonight happens to be the tail end of the yard site of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's wife, sometimes known as the Rebbitzin. Although she never called herself the Rebbitzin, she would never allow anybody to call herself the Rebbitzin. She ran away from any publicity. Anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit about her and what we can learn about faith and calm and power, person's personal power to sculpt themselves and sculpt other people. And so anyway, I'll say quickly my 4 things that I always say. Number 1, we are in an extraordinary time. It's crucial to remember that, we're in an extraordinary time. And why is it extraordinary? Because the Lubavitcher Rebbe told us that the Geula, the redemption of the Jews in the world, is unfolding. Number 2, you and I, we are meant to be here at this time, at this, most amazing juncture in human history. Number 3, we were given all the tools and all the instructions we need to navigate these times. And number 4, what we're doing tonight by learning about the redemption, we are actively forwarding it. And the Rebbe said it's in fact learning about the redemption is the fastest way to forward it. So anyway, the woman that I want to speak about, her name is let's see if I have a picture here. Her name is Chaya Mushka Schneerson. She was the daughter. She was one of 3 daughters of the previous Rebbe. That's her picture, and she was one of 3 daughters of the previous Rebbe. And way before she married Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who eventually became the 7th Rebbe, she was already an extraordinary person. So what was she extraordinary from? What are the things that I want to talk about? Number one, she had tremendous faith and calm. And where does faith and calm of anybody come from? Faith and calm of anybody comes from an understanding that every single thing that happens comes from Hashem. And the corollary to that is that everything that God does is good. And even if I don't see it as good, it is good. And therefore, a person can be calm because the first principle of Jewish belief is that nobody can do anything to harm you and nobody can do anything to benefit you that God doesn't want to happen. Everything is only with God's purview. So the more a person understands that, the more faith and calm they have. That number one, God decides everything, and number 2, God is good. And anyway, so I want to talk about that she had tremendous faith and calm, and she exhibited it throughout her life. Number 2, she was the most private person in the world. Sari and I know a very private person. This person, she was so private, it was unbelievable, unbelievably private. And even so, she had an incredible concern for other people. And number 3, I want to talk about, through her, our personal power to sculpt ourselves and others in our family, especially in our family, but our friends too. So, okay. So let's talk about faith and calm first. So, and that it comes from the complete recognition that God only runs the world and that everything God does is good. So from the time she was a kid, it's not easy being the kid of a Rebbe, right? And because a Rebbe takes big responsibilities on his shoulders. And every single Lubavitcher Rebbe was arrested for safeguarding Judaism in Russia. Our Rebbe was also arrested. He wasn't arrested in Russia, he was arrested in Paris. But every single Lubavitcher Rebbe of the 7 Rebbes, they were all thrown in jail for promoting Judaism and among Jews. And so anyway, in World War I, she was 14 to 7. During those years, she was 14 to 17 years old. And her father asked her, and she agreed and did it faithfully. There were underground yeshivas, and you could get in big trouble if those yeshivas were found out. In fact, her father, let me show you a picture of her father. This is a great picture of her father. Yeah, I love this picture. Her father, let's see, can I make it focused? Can you see that? Yeah, her father, the previous Rebbe, the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe, he made a pact during that time with 9 of his chassidim, that together they would make a minyan, and if necessary, they would give their lives up to preserve Judaism in Russia. And in fact, about 8 of them, 8 out of the 10, actually ended up dying, being killed for their Jewish activities. The ones who survived were, and I might have mentioned this before, an ancestor of Yossi Jacobson, Rabbi Jacobson, who was an ancestor of his. I think Yeskel Shimon said his grandfather, and the Frierdiker Rebbe. They're the only ones who survived. But during those terrible times, she also played an active role. She was a young teenager, and she would smuggle, people didn't suspect her. she would put like a big salami under this side of her coat and a big loaves of bread under this side. And she would go to these underground yeshivas, and when nobody was looking, she would lower the food through a window, and she could get in tremendous trouble for that. So anyway, she smuggled candles, food, and all kinds of stuff, and she did it repeatedly. She was very, very calm. Her father, the Russians were determined to crush him. They couldn't get enough evidence, and finally they arrested him. They were absolutely brutal to him. When they came and arrested him, they broke into the house. They broke into the Rebbe's house, and and they turned everything upside down. And she calmly walked to the window because she had just come back from a date with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. This is in the 1920s already, and she sticks her head out the window and she says, "Schneerson, we have guests." And he knew immediately what that meant, and he went immediately to the big Hasidim of that time, and he said, "Destroy the evidence, destroy any or hide or destroy anything that says where the underground yeshivas are, who's giving money for it. Destroy all the records because they're trying to get us." So at the age of 23, she already had full power of attorney for her father because he trusted her so much. And yeah, okay. So anyway, I want to also talk about how she was just because you have full faith and calm and you believe that everything God does is good and you believe that God does everything does not mean that you are insensitive to other people's pain. You know, it could go that way. A person could say, well, everything God does is good. You're in trouble, but everything God does is good. No, she was the opposite. She had, in the early years when the Rebbe, and even in the later years, when the Rebbe was sending out shluchim to every corner of the world, young Chabad couples in their early 20s, and they would go to Timbuktu. They would go to places where there were a few Jews, and they would set up a Chabad house. And many of them had no backing whatsoever. Some people were lucky, and another senior shaliach would say, "Here's $5,000. Open up a place here." And they went. I just watched a marvelous story about this guy. And he asked the head shaliach in Russia, who's Beryl Lazar, who's still the head shaliach. He said, where can I go? And he said, I can't remember the city, but it's the third biggest city in Russia, and it's way in Siberia. And it's -20, -30 over there. And they make miracles wherever they go. You wouldn't believe the show there. You wouldn't believe the community that they built. You have to see it in pictures. It's just absolutely outstanding. And these guys do it. These couples do it all over the world. So while people are oohing and eyeing over what these people accomplish, she was in great pain. The Rebbetzin was in great pain and great concern because she knew how hard it was. They're extremely young. They just left Crown Heights for the first time in their lives. They have a family network in Crown Heights. And they're completely alone in these communities with no financial none, if any, little, if any, financial backing, no community support. They start having babies one after another, and it's extremely hard on the woman and on the man because it's very hard to be cut up from. It's very hard to live without a community, extremely hard, and she was not only concerned about the shluchim, she was concerned about all the Jews she heard about. There's a nice story about this guy named Yaakov Brower. It's a local story. Yaakov Brower was he was a professor. He is a professor now in McGill, and my husband, I think, knows him. And at a certain point, he was applying to be a professor, like a full professor, and he got 3 offers. And he asked the Rebbe where he should go, and the Rebbe answered him a few days later, like 3 days later. And many years later, after the Rebbetzin was ready, after her neshama had already gone to heaven, the Rebbe ended up saying, "Stay at McGill, take the job at McGill that they're offering you." He had an offer in California at a very nice university and another place also. And the Rebbe said, "Stay in McGill." And later, Dr. Brower, Professor Brower, found out that there was this woman before, in those 3 days, there was this woman, and this guy, the dean of the school, had no idea. This woman, Mrs. Schneerson, who had called, she never met Jakob Brouwer in her life, but she called the dean of the school and drilled him for a half an hour about what benefits there are for professors, what's the retirement plan, what is the policy for this, what is the policy for that. And she must have done it at the other 2 universities too, like a mother to every chassid. So anyway, being totally trusting does not mean that you just let things go. She was super involved and super concerned about everybody. So I want to say, I want to tell my favorite story about the Rebbitzin. And my favorite story about the Rebbitzin combines both these qualities, both faith and calm, and total allegiance to others in her little circle. So I might have told the story briefly last year, but I like hearing it every year. And so this was in the late 70s. The Rebbe, at the age of 77, had a major heart attack on Shmini Atzeres in Shul. Thousands and thousands of Hasidim were there. And I told you the story earlier that, when people realized, the Rebbe sat down, and when people realized something was wrong with the Rebbe, they started breaking the windows, saying, "He needs air. The Rebbe needs air." And I already told you about how the Rebbe said they realized that the Rebbe had had a major heart attack, and all the doctors that were available came. And for some, in some way, they were able to tell him, they were able to know that the Rebbe was going to have a bigger heart attack. It was in the footing. It was inevitable. This initial heart attack was going to be followed by a much bigger heart attack, and the Rebbe said, "I'm not." They insisted that the Rebbe go to the hospital, and the Rebbe said, "No, I'm staying here. This is where I belong. I'm staying here. I have all the prayers for the Hasidim. I have all my life is here. I'm not going away." And they told the Rebbe. Meanwhile, all the Hasidim ran home. They ran home, and they had whatever money they had in the house. They stuffed into paper bags, and they ran to 770 to set up a makeshift hospital there. And you're not allowed to touch money on Yontif, but when a life is at stake, you can do anything, almost anything, virtually anything, pretty much anything. So you can violate all the laws of Shabbos, that's for sure, on Yontif. And so anyway, meantime, somebody had walked to the Rebbitzins' house, told her what's happening, and she walked to 770. And at that point, the doctors were saying, "You have to," the Rebbe refused many times. "You're not taking me. I'm not going." And then they said, "Rebbe, okay, we're not going to take you, but we need to sedate you. We need to put you into a deep sleep so that when the second heart attack rolls around, you will be able to withstand it much better than if you're awake." And the Rebbe said, "No, you're not doing that to me either, because I know you. I know that as soon as I'm asleep, you're going to take me to the hospital. I know you." And they said, "Rebbe, we promise we won't. If we promise you that we will not take you to the hospital when you're asleep, can we sedate you?" And the Rebbe said, "Yes, in that circumstance, you can sedate me." And so they sedated the Rebbe. The Rebbitzin came in. She was like 78 at this point, and she started organizing everything. And they came to her and they said, "We're coming to you. The Rebbe made us promise. The Rebbe said that he doesn't want to go to the hospital, but we're telling you that he's going to die here. This is a matter of life and death, and there's no way he's going to survive here. He has to go to the hospital. They have totally different equipment, and it's a totally different setting. And if you tell us that we can take him, we're going to listen to you and not to the Rebbe." And she said those famous words, "Was my man will ich." What my man wants, man in Yiddish is husband. What my man wants is what I want. You're not doing it. And so she was, it's a magnificent sentence. I try and think about it on a regular basis. Number one, what does it say? Number one, she has total faith and calm. She is gambling the most precious thing in her life. They have no children. and they have been their each other's everything. It's not like they were each other's confidant. He did everything with her. He consulted with her on everything, and they were like extremely tight. And she had nothing. I mean, she didn't have much of a life outside of the Rebbe at her choice, and even so, she had total faith in common. Number two, she had total allegiance with this other person in her life, and total allegiance with what was important to him. And I have to say that like with the advent of the women's liberation movement, the women's liberation movement did marvelous things that were totally, totally, totally needed and totally due. And we owe a lot to it, you know, equal pay for equal work, equal opportunity in the workplace, a lot of things that were extremely important. But one thing that went out the window are sane marriages, you know. It's there's no sense of I don't know, we don't treat our husbands like that, you know. We don't what they say is not sacred, right? It's not sacred if you're lucky enough to have a husband. And any other relative, it's we're just like so full of ourselves and our power and what we know is best and all this kind of stuff that we've lost sight of how to make a true bond. And I'm just totally blown away by her her understanding that in order to have a bond with somebody else, you have to not only love them, you have to be totally aligned with what's important to them and totally loyal to them. And you have to give them a little bit of a crown, a little bit of a gold crown. You have to put them a little bit on a pedestal, you know. You know, the old saying in Judaism was, if you make him a king, he'll make you a queen. And it works that way. But if you make him like, listen, guy, I know so much better than you do, it doesn't make for that kind of a relationship. So this extends to all relationships, not just husband and wife, that when we show another person that we are there with them on the same page, and when something is critically important to them, or when something is not even critically, but important to them, it's also important to us, you have made that other person. You know, if you think about it, can you make a person? Yes, you can make a person. She made a Rebbe. Is that the most amazing thing? You can make a Rebbe. She made a Rebbe. First of all, it was because of her he became Rebbe, because she knew that this is what had to be done, and she's known as his biggest chassid. And not that she didn't have opinions. She was a very opinionated woman, but still she was totally, she gave him her total trust. And that element of trust and that element of allegiance, I think, have flown the coop in most relationships. So, and that level of respect for one another has unfortunately flown the coop. So I try and read stories about her. I have this book that I'm now going to read, and I try and learn from it, because I'm a product of our post-70s society, and I'm wounded by it. My understanding of relationships is wounded by it. And when you read about great women like this, it reminds you of how to navigate a truly successful relationship, not just a relationship that endures, but a relationship the way Hashem envisioned it. So, so this very quiet woman, very, very to herself, she made the Rebbe, and she was his greatest supporter. And with that, I would like to end and open up the floor to a discussion. So I'm going to stop